I would like to introduce our distinguished presenters. First up, is Eve Cooney, Youth Programs Coordinator at the St. Louis Zoo. And our second presenter is Natalie Lucas, Engagement Specialist for the U.S. Climate Action Network and the founder of Care About Climate. Eve will kick us off first, followed by Natalie. Take it away, Eve.
Thank you, Lisa. And if anybody else is dying of curiosity, there's about 35% of you who are actually youth, middle or high school students, and the rest of you is about an even split between teachers at different grades, youth leaders, parents, etc. So welcome to everybody. We are super glad that you're here with us tonight. My name is Eve Cooney. I'm the Youth Programs Manager at the St. Louis Zoo. My job is twofold, although, you know, there's always the miscellaneous duties as assigned role, but my two main jobs are I am the director of our Camp Kankazoo summer camp program. So that's Camp Kankazoo and Teen Camp. So I work during the summers with kids first grade through ninth grade, but then I also co-manage our Zoo Alive teen volunteer program for high school students. So one of the things that is most fantastic about my job at the zoo, just because I have to talk about me for a little bit, is since I have worked at the zoo for 27 years and about 20 years in this role, I have known many people from the time they were 5 or 6 years old until they are an adult, sometimes working at the zoo as a keeper or as an environmental educator or a teacher or a leader. So it's, again, one of the great joys of my job that I've been able to see youth become conservation leaders from the time they are kids at the zoo learning about animals till they start learning about issues until they become the conservation, leaders that I get to be friends with now. So that is awesome. And with that, I am going to share my screen here, making sure to share sound and all of that jazz. Okay, we'll start our show. Okay, so this is our community climate forum number 6, fostering youth leadership. The photo you see in front of you are some of our Zoo Alive teen volunteers. That is the group that I'll be focusing on most tonight as, again, they've been doing some really cool projects. With our Zoo Alive volunteers, they, back before the pandemic, they did a lot of volunteering at the zoo, helping with our camps, our overnight programs and things. But several years ago, our group of volunteers started the Buy to Bags program. You might have heard a little bit about it if you were at the previous webinar about plastics. The Buy to Bags program, the goal is to reduce single-use plastics in the environment. And so our ZAs can volunteer for 2 or 3 hours on grounds, talk to visitors and families about plastics in the environment and the plastic pollution problem, and ask them to sign a pledge pledging to, eliminate or refuse single-use plastic bags and instead use reusable bags. Okay, so I bring this up because by giving youth that opportunity to be leaders right there at the zoo, it's a very bite-sized action that they can take. And I think I try to encourage every single one of our ZAs to volunteer to work at one of these Buy to Bags tables. It can be a little bit, anxiety provoking, maybe a little bit at first. If people aren't used to the idea of, I'm gonna tell other people what they should be doing. For some people that's stressful. But the thing that they quickly learn is that people who come to the zoo want to know how they can help animals. So by doing this, they realize, I'm not being bossy telling people what to do. I'm actually providing a service that people are asking for. And that's something to think about when you're taking conservation action. This is something that everybody want, okay, maybe not everybody. This is something that people who come to visit our zoo definitely want. And they want to hear youth voice. Youth are a trusted voice when it comes to environmental issues and conservation issues, because people realize this is your world. We want this to be a good world and a good future for you. Okay, so as I mentioned, lots of what we do in Zoo Alive is helping with education programs on grounds. But when COVID-19 happened, we, like many organizations, had to switch to Zoom and go virtual for a period of time. That happened, quickly without warning, as you recall. And, for a while, we just continued on with our monthly meetings on Zoom instead of at the zoo. We wanted to make sure that people were still, our teens were still learning about animals and zoo conservation efforts. So we had guest speakers come and, talk about some animals conservation issues and things like that. We of course played games. We tried to make it as engaging as we could, but we got to a point where it's like, okay, we can't just mess around, hanging out on Zoom, hoping that we're going to be in person again. We need to kind of make a change. And so we reorganized the Zoo Alive program into a virtual program and ask any of our ZAs who wanted to stay on, opt into this new Zoo Alive program. We asked them to form a conservation action project group and to work on a project. So we made the switch to this virtual conservation action project based format in December, with a deadline of May 1st when they had to have a project complete. So when we switched, we still had mandatory requirements of the ZAs, but like I said, they could opt in. So we still had one meeting per month, but we switched the meetings. Instead of them just being about, zoo animals and conservation topics and fun zoo topics, we had speakers about conservation action and how to take action, including letter writing, how to write a thank you letter to an organization you think is doing a good job, how to write an ask letter to an organization that you want to change in some way, how to make a phone call to a public official, an alderman, a senator, a representative. And at these meetings, we actually did the thing. So like we all, during a point in the meeting about public officials, we all looked up the phone number of our, one of our local public officials and made a call right there during the meeting. So it was practice taking these actions along with learning about them. Our ZAs also had to, on their own, meet with their Conservation Action Project group at least once a month, do some other virtual volunteering, which could just be working on their project, and do a reflection each month. So once we had this new relaunch of our virtual program, we ended up with 6 Conservation Action Project groups. Our Palm in Hand group was looking at palm oil issues, which is an ongoing conservation project the zoo has. We had a group looking at local foods. We had our shark group who was interested in shark conservation, who actually broadened and shifted a little bit to focus on sustainable seafood and encouraging that. We had a group interested in invasive species and specifically honeysuckle, which is a shrub that is highly invasive and can really change a natural habitat for the worse, not for the better, by outcompeting native species. And we had some groups who were like, hey, I just want to do something about my favorite animal, so we had a hellbender group, that's an aquatic salamander that's an endangered species, and a box turtle group. So we're going to fast forward all the way to our Conservation Action Project Summit on May 1st and hear about the honeysuckle group. Hopefully. No. Or if we don't hear about the honeysuckle group, I can describe what their call to action was. I'm not sure why that isn't playing because it did just 10 minutes ago. But what our honeysuckle group did, as you can see, their call to action is that they wrote emails and letters to a variety of nurseries and places that sell Amur honeysuckle. Amur honeysuckle is one of the species that's highly invasive. There are also good species of honeysuckle that are native, non-invasive. But they called and wrote emails and they didn't hear responses from many of them. But in one case, one of the members of that group was visiting this nursery called Timothy's Garden, saw Amur honeysuckle on sale, asked to speak to the owner. I wish you could hear this in Caitlin's own words here because she's so cute when she describes it. But she talked to the owner about it, told the owner of this nursery about Amur honeysuckle. They really knew nothing about it, didn't know it was an invasive species, didn't know the conservation implications, and agreed that they would stop selling that type of honeysuckle. So for this group, it was, they describe it as, it was a small success. It was only one of these organizations, but it was still a success, and the feeling they got of, bringing this issue to light to an organization who was willing to listen to them and make a change is definitely a feel-good moment. Okay, well, I'm glad the slide advanced. That was helpful. And I don't think this one's going to play for some reason either. But that is cool. The other group, our local foods group, and we're going to have to put this website in the chat later, but they actually created a website. They built a website. It's something that none of them had ever done before, that included a map to local farmers markets. So they, just Googled, looked up information on where farmers markets were in the St. Louis area and put them all together on an interactive map. So you can click on a place in the map and it shows you where it is, what the hours are, what the farmers market is. You can find one near your home. And they also were able to link to the Sustainable Dining STL website, which shows you local restaurants that are Green Dining Alliance certified. And part of that certification also includes sourcing local products. So those were two awesome things that they did. Some of the other groups, the local foods group also created a bookmark that included a QR code so people could get to their website. They wrote some education activities for kids about sustainable foods. And some of our other groups, the Hellbender group, also wrote some fun games and activities that we could play with campers. The palm oil and seafood groups did a letter writing campaign. Our Box Turtle and Hellbender groups created Instagram pages, which were just sharing awareness about these animals and their conservation and what you could do. Our Honeysuckle group created an infographic and then shared it with their fellow Zoo Alive volunteers for them to share on their own social media. They were hoping it would, become a trend to conserve honeysuckle. And one of the most exciting things, and something you would expect if you think about it, but at the end of every one of their presentations in May, they had this litany of things that they want to do next. Here's how we could expand on this, or, here's a barrier that we didn't know exists. So we're going to try to, take this other direction. Or when we were talking to somebody, we heard this other perspective that we didn't know about before. So we want to try to incorporate that. So there's definitely a bunch of learning that took place, and that one small project, that one small win definitely was leading them to want to do more and more. Okay, so how some of the tips and nitty gritty of how and why we think this was successful for our Zoo Alive volunteers. It was voluntary, totally voluntary for them to participate in this program, knowing that it would include a mandatory conservation action project. So they did get to opt in, but then there were mandatory things that they needed to do, and that worked. We have, over the past, since 2004, when Zoo Alive started, have tried to encourage volunteers to do community conservation projects or actions, but haven't really seen too many results. And for those teachers that are on this webinar tonight, I think you'll know that without a due date or a deadline, most of the time nothing is going to happen. So again, it was voluntary, but having that due date was important to get them to take action. And we had this drop dead deadline that was not that far away. So we started in December. The project had to be done by April 1st, and then we wanted them to work on their presentation until May 1st. So we think that short timeline of only around 4 months was really important, and it helped them to focus on what is an actual problem that I can solve in this time frame. Teens also, as you know, if you are a youth, you have homework, you have sports, you might have scouts or a youth group or other things that you're involved in. So finding enough spare time to do a big project, is impossible. So we wanted to make sure and help them to narrow down a problem. We provided information about some issues or problems that they might think of solving, but always made sure to provide information on solutions or brainstorm what possible solutions were as well. And not only what possible solutions there were, but we made an effort to always let our teens know about groups that were already addressing these problems. You can feel very alone in this work when you watch the news and it looks like nobody's doing anything about it. But I can tell you there are many individuals and many organizations and many groups out there doing conservation work, working on climate solutions. So when you start a project like this, you are joining a community of awesome people who are, working in a positive direction. You're definitely not alone. And in helping teens to identify their problems, that was really a focus at the beginning, because, if you ask somebody, oh, what's an important problem that we can solve, your mind might go to, climate change, extinction, hunger, global hunger, poverty. These are big, scary problems that are complicated, and they maybe don't have a clear reason. It might be many factors that play into it. It's hard to even know where to start. So we try to narrow those big, scary problems down into what is a solvable problem, again, that you can actually work on in 2 to 3 months. So addressing something like energy or fuel efficiency is something that will address the big, scary problem of climate. So our local foods group, when you eat, lettuce that is grown in Jefferson County, that saves a whole lot of fuel versus buying lettuce that was grown in Chile or in Florida or Mexico. So that local foods group, even though you might at first be like, what does that have to do with climate change? That is a fossil fuel saving action that they were promoting. Habitat restoration speaks directly to extinction. So our group that was doing honeysuckle removal or invasive species removal, that was a problem they were trying to solve with really a 3-pronged attack. They were removing honeysuckle, they were trying to get nurseries not to sell it, and they were trying to raise awareness of the problem through their infographic. So all of those things could help with biodiversity. And if you are interested in social issues like hunger and poverty, there's plenty of solvable problems that are related to that, including just helping people with better accessibility to resources or fundraising, drives where you can collect things that, people need or help gain access. So another tool that we gave them, or skills, was to help with planning their project. So as Stephen Covey says, you begin with the end in mind, but I kind of modify that to begin with the end and the middle in mind. So beginning with the end in mind, you're thinking, what is success going to look like? So what is my endpoint? How do I know it's over? And the deadline helps with that, but still trying to narrow down your project to what are you trying to do and how will you know it's done? And then the middle, is really the work. What is it that you actually like to do? If you like to be outdoors, digging in the dirt in all kinds of weather, then doing a habitat restoration project might be for you. If you're more of an Excel spreadsheet person who likes to organize information and try to keep people on track, then whatever the project is, there is a role for those skills in a group as well. Or if you're a people person, you really love the social aspect of volunteering with other people, to talking to visitors or talking to others about things that are going on. There's always a role for people like that to help raise awareness and spread the news. After you have a plan, our next step is to we didn't really do anything in terms of helping our ZAs to do the work. I think that was the part that they, were perfectly capable of doing on their own after they had the plan. But some things to remember while you are doing the work: definitely take photos, because as we will see in our next little slide, sharing the results at the end is a key part. So you want to take photos. Everybody likes to see that. Share your journey, bring other people with you when you're going out to do work. Let people know what you're doing. And then measure and track those W's and L's, the wins and the learns. You are not always going to get the outcome that you want, but you will almost always learn something by your efforts and through trying. So definitely keep track of those. And again, that's a way you measure success. Then sharing the results You should be thinking from the beginning about how you're going to share your results. There are a lot of youth gatherings, either virtual or in-person gatherings, youth climate summits or conservation summits. I urge you all to just Google Youth Climate Summit and see what comes up online. Some of these summits are there to teach you how to do a conservation project. Some of them are there for teens to share a project that they've already done. Or like we did, hold your own youth climate summit or conservation summit in your school. Challenge others to, do a project, and then you can all get together and share with each other and invite friends and family and whomever you want to join. Or you might just be sharing through social media, a press release that you can write and submit to a local newspaper, school newspaper. It's really important to share your results because, like, you can't be a leader if you just hide in your room and do your project all by yourself. Okay, so part of the leadership part is being out there where others can see, hey, wow, look what they did. Maybe I could do that too. You want to, it's not like you're there to toot your own horn. That's not what sharing your results are like. It's letting people know this is doable. It's okay to talk about this stuff. It's okay to do this stuff, kind of normalizing, climate solutions. And of course, make sure to celebrate at the end. So one tool that we gave our teens, I'm not going to read you everything that's on these little worksheets in fine print, but we did give them a planning worksheet that went through step by step how you can make a plan for a conservation action project, from brainstorming the problem to different options of actions you could take, making short-term and medium and long-term goals, thinking about who else is going to need to be involved, what resources do you need? Do you need money? Do you need shovels? Do you need photocopies? How you're going to track your success, and so on. So that was a tool we gave them. And I just wanted to kind of end with a little bit about justice and responsibility. Okay, we're definitely in that situation now where, those of us alive today, especially the youth, are not the ones who created this problem. And I don't ever put it on our teens. I never say that, people made this problem and now it's your job to clean it up. Okay, it's not. It's everybody alive on the planet's today job to take a little piece of this, to take little bites of it and try to go forward with solutions. Okay, so it's not fair or right. The generations before us have caused a problem that we are living with now. But, it is just and right that we can all try to do a part to, I'll just say to do our part to come up with some positive change. And my very last thing, just a shameless plug, Zoo Alive 2022, we are accepting applications now for our next group of Zoo Alive volunteers. So you can visit our website and find our application. They are due March 3rd, but we've kind of been on hold for the past couple of years and are very excited to be able to open up our applications and get some new volunteers at the zoo. So that is what I have. And I will hand it over to Natalie.
Cool. That is really exciting and it lines up so well with mine. So I'm very excited about this. So for those who do not know me, which is probably most of you, my name is Natalie Lucas. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I have a bunch of things that I've been doing. I am going to kind of go through the history of my life and all the things that kind of Eve was talking about, are a lot of things that I was able to do, which is very exciting. And so I am now 30 years old. So I've been working on the climate movement since I was about 15 years old. So it's been about 15 years, which is kind of wild. And it's probably older than some of you, which is also kind of wild, but very exciting. And so I'm going to share my screen really quick and then we'll get started. So one of the titles that I have, I am the founder of Care About Climate. It was an organization that I founded when I was just starting graduate school, which I did when I was 23 years old. And it was all about youth engagement and how to build an international community of young people to take on climate action. And so these are some of our core team members. And we were in Colorado the last time we could get together in person. So So just wanted to go through some stuff. The pictures are going to look old because they are old. They were taken with a digital camera, and the resolution is not great. And after trying to put this together today, I realized that. And so I just kind of wanted to go through the project that really got me started. So what Eve was talking about and how you get started with just thinking about like, how do you do something is pretty critical, and learning how to build out those skills is also really important. So my first project was when I started when I was 15 and I finished it when I was like 16, was Flagstaff Go Plasticless. I am from Flagstaff, Arizona, and the first project I did was basically I organized a plastic bag drive for schools around the school district. There's only one in Flagstaff because it's a pretty small town. And so kids were like collecting plastic bags, and we would go around, and if you can kind of see here, like this is me presenting and this is us doing like a tabling event, kind of like Eve was showing. So we go around and do presentations, and for the kids that collected the most plastic bags for recycling, and then also were the most that signed up for like using reusable bag pledges, we ended up being able to give them a donut party. And so it was like it was kind of a competitive thing between schools, between classes, and at the end of the day, we were able to recycle a lot of bags. And it was the first thing I had done that was like very concrete and could like really see the success. And we were literally like laying in it, which is also kind of strange, but it was really fun. So I guess what I wanted to give you some resources in addition to the zoo, but I honestly think that the Zoo Alive program is a really good introduction into kind of thinking about this. So Eve didn't say it directly, but organizing and project management are the kind of skills that you need in order to do projects. And you'll never be taught it in school, but it will be some of the most important skills that you develop in your life. And I'll go over what some of those are. But so in addition to the Zoo Alive program, there are different organizations nationwide. And I like getting involved not only at my community, but I like getting involved nationally because it shows that I'm not alone. And I get to learn best practices from people who are all over the country. And you can pretty much name any large city and I know someone there because I have been in these national networks. So it makes me feel, it's like where I made a ton of friends. It makes me feel special, and it has been like a really great community. So I wanted to mention 3 organizations that I think are helpful, and they kind of range for what kind of things they teach you. So Power Shift Network is a network of youth organizations. They hold a Power Shift every, I think, 2 to 3 years. And basically they invite all their organizations that are in the network to offer trainings and things like that for young people to be able to learn how to do organizing and project management within their communities. Sierra Student Coalition, which I'll dive into more specifically next, is where I learned all my tools. They're another national organization that is the youth branch of the Sierra Club. And it is, they have what are called summer programs, which I'll talk about in a moment, that basically teach you how to do these things. Like, how do you set up a project plan? How do you do all this stuff? Just like Eve was showing. So the Zoo Alive program is a really good idea for that too. And for those who are wanting to do, to be a little bit more radical in the activism and really do more direct action, Sunrise is a really good place for young people too. And is really about like trying to make people a little annoyed with young people so that the things will actually get done, is what I will say. But they've made huge impacts, and it's pretty incredible what young people can do when they put their minds to it. So just wanting to go over like Sprague. So this is a program that you all could potentially join. It's called the Summer Program. It's run by the Sierra Student Coalition. I trained at it for like 5 years in New Mexico, Louisiana, California, and in Colorado. But basically what it is like since I was able to do a project, I took the skills that I learned here, which were like things like facilitation, meeting a decision maker, developing a campaign, how to do press and social media, like all of that stuff they basically taught me in this summer program, which is like a week long. And then I took it home and tried the plastic bag project. Basically it worked well. And then the year after that, I was then a trainer teaching other youth how to do this. And the youth range from anywhere from like 15, 14 to in their 30s, because like there's a pretty broad range of like who is involved in this movement, mostly from high school to college. And it was a really cool way to get involved. And it was really interesting as a high schooler trying to teach college students how to do organizing, but it made me feel pretty awesome. So then after I did my project at home, I moved to Tucson, Arizona, where I went to the University of Arizona. And then I joined Students for Sustainability. I started running this group after my first year because I was really excited about it. And this is probably where I learned most of my like hands-on stuff of how to actually accomplish projects. And all of it had to do with like waste reduction or climate action. So during my time there, I worked with students to essentially set up a composting program. We call it Compost Cats because the University of Arizona mascot is a wildcat. Then we had Greening the Game, where we literally would pick up recycling after football games. And now it's expanded to basketball and baseball after I left, to make sure that those things weren't going to waste. We started a community garden, which is still there today. And they have big cisterns which collect water so that you don't actually use water from like the actual system. And in Arizona, that's like a really big deal because of climate change and because of just excessive use of water. And then we created a green fund, which is like part of the tuition from students goes to a fund that students can then apply for grants for. So that's actually what started Compost Cats, Greening the Game, and the Community Garden. Was there was a fund that we had done a petition for in order to get that we could apply to get money. And so thinking about how you can like set up systems to acquire funds is also really a cool thing that you can think about doing. And then we talked about food in the unions too, like how could we make the materials which it's served on more sustainable? How can we make sure that there is less meat in the food to make it more sustainable? Because you have to feed cows and other animals plants. And instead, if you just eat the plants, then there's like a reduction in just how much you have to do. Also, there's methane associated with animal products. So we did a lot of this kind of work, and it was super local. It was just practicing, like wanting to see recycling in the football stadium happen. How do we get that to happen? We talked to facilities management. We talked to the athletics department. We talked to the ROTC, who were the people who were actually cleaning up the stadium after games. And so you had to like do all this coordination, which was also really interesting. And it helped me understand how to like communicate with people at a new level. So I did all this global work while still involved with these national organizations, which allowed me to start making a global impact. I am really excited about all of the work I've been able to do locally, and I think that that's like really where you need to start. So I want to say that before I go into this to launching about talking about some of the stuff I've done with the United Nations. But basically part of the Sierra Club and Sierra Student Coalition, they sent a delegation of young people each year. The bottom right-hand corner picture with me and my friends, this is our delegation from one year. They would send essentially several young people to the UN climate negotiations to make comments and provide feedback to the negotiations. This right here is Trig Tally. Sorry, my cat is walking on my computer, so that's why it's shaking. But this is Trig Talley. He is one of the lead negotiators, and I was able to meet him in Doha, Qatar when I first went, and this was in 2012, I believe. And so because of all the background that I had doing the local work and actually making things happen on the ground, I was able to bring that and say, here are the ways that we can actually like reduce emissions, do it in a way that is like good for young people and engages young people. And here's how we need to think about this stuff nationally and internationally as well. So I became really inspired by going to the international negotiations and really wanted to build a global community of young people that could work together on these projects, because I really, I love international stuff just generally. And I went to undergrad for environmental science, and then I got another degree in like philosophy and politics. But when I went to grad school, I did international sustainable development. So this idea of like bringing the world together and exploring it has always been like a really big passion of mine. And so I was like, how can I just make this happen and help other young people do it? So when I was 23, I started Care About Climate. It's a little hard to start an organization, but you kind of figure it out. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but you just read the paperwork. And what we did to get free legal advice was our school actually like had grad students who were in law school giving legal advice, so that like to undergraduate students. And so we used whatever resources that we had on campus to be able to do that. Alternatively, doing clubs and stuff, I mean, that's where I did most of my work. The plastic bag work was through Peace Club, which was preserving environments and conserving energy. And then all of the other work was done through Students for Sustainability. So clubs are a lot easier because then you don't have to like make a whole entire organization. And you can do it under your institution, like your school. And I think that's a lot easier. But because I was graduating, I really wanted to do this. So I was able to connect with a lot of people from around the world. And my first project was driving around the United States and giving presentations about the Paris Agreement and what was going to happen with it. And so we raised $5,000 that first year, and people started getting involved. And it has grown to an organization that has over like 70 volunteers and $100,000 of budget, which is still pretty small, but it's a pretty big deal for me because that was like something that I had worked on for a really long time. And I've actually now passed it on to another young person who is younger than me, so that she can really take the reins, and I'm mentoring her now so that we can keep the cycle going. Mentorship is a huge important part of this. If you don't have a backup behind you, your organization and work isn't going to move forward anymore. So I am really excited for you all to be getting involved. I'm happy to answer any questions. I did put my email up here as well as the Care About Climate email. And if you're interested in doing something on this like larger scale, we are all virtual, but that's how we have been. So there was no real shift when we went through the pandemic, so which is strange, but we were operating the same way. So if you're interested in social media or writing blogs or talking to the press or organizing an action or thinking about going to the UN or want to do one of your projects locally that you think would be good to have nationally, or if you're interested to even put on one of the conservation summits, like Care About Climate is one of those organizations where you can build and grow within it. And I'd be happy to help make that happen. So that is kind of my story, and I'm really excited that you all were here tonight. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'll put my information in the chat so you all have it. And yeah, I'm very excited. Passing it back to you, Lisa.
All right, well, thank you both so much. And yeah, the Q&A and chat are available if anybody has any questions for our awesome presenters. And I just have to say, just to kick us off, I have known and worked with Eve for over 20 years. I'm not aging us at all, Eve. And I've always been incredibly impressed working with you and working for you. And Natalie, I met you probably 5 years ago, and you introduced yourself as, "Hi, I'm Natalie. I started a nonprofit in my early 20s." I'm like, "What?" That's incredible. Like, so both of you have just blown my mind, and I've learned so much from both of you. So I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you both being here. So yeah, open it up if anybody has any questions or anything else they'd like to share. Natalie, thank you for sharing your information in the chat. And Eve, I think there was something you wanted to share in the chat, or was there something I was supposed to put in the chat?
Oh, no, you're right. I was going to look up the website that our ZAs made, their local foods website. So I will
Oh,
look
okay.
that up.
Awesome.
And if we're going to out each other, I will say, Lisa, you're one of those youth that I've gotten to see grow into someone who does remarkable action on behalf of animals and the climate. So I'm super proud of my little Lisa. You were only 16, not 6. I didn't know you when you were 6. I'm not that old.
So we do have a question for you, Eve. How do you plan to do YA this summer? I think maybe means ZAs this summer. Will you be in person, hybrid? How do you think it's going to work for coming up?
Well, our plan is to have an in-person camp again this summer. We've done virtual camp for the past 2 summers, so I'm well acquainted with Zoom and some website building now. I didn't think I would be. We are planning to do an in-person camp this summer, and we will definitely have Zoo Alive volunteers help with that. And as the season progresses and it gets a little warmer, we will have Bite Bags on grounds again, and hopefully we'll even have overnight programs starting up again. I mean, of course, it all just depends on on COVID and what's going on, but that's our hope and our plan right now.
Fabulous. All right, let's see. There's no other questions just yet. So I have a question for you, Natalie. So did you find it hard? And I'm actually kind of reflecting a lot of questions we've gotten in previous webinars from young people who are struggling with getting people to take them seriously. So did you find any pushback or any challenges or anything that really helped you as a very young person, really going into the world, doing such a big thing like this?
All the time. And I would say I still get it. I'm still looked at as like a pretty young woman. I mean, like in comparison to high school students, I am very much look like an adult, but in a lot of like adult spaces, I still am like, people are like, how are you even in this room with me? Because you're so young and you have very little experience. But like some of the parts of my resume that I didn't tell you all, I mean, like I'm the youngest person that has served as on the Sierra Club board of directors. I'm the youngest woman specifically. I started all these projects and things like that. And I am pretty like excited and passionate to be in the space. But I also, like I was saying, have 15 years of experience under my belt now, which is more than some adults. But because they see who I am and my age, it's hard for people to accept. So the way I've dealt with it in the past is I just kind of blow them out of the water. I say like what I think, I write what I do. I like make a creative campaigns. I show exactly how everything is going to work. And I basically prove that I am worth listening to, and that I have something valuable to say. And it's like really annoying when people are devaluing you. And also youth, I think, are most important to be listening to, because you all haven't been like you all have new ideas and new ways of doing things, and you aren't experienced in like certain meetings and everything. And so you can open a different way to organize, which can change the world. Whereas a lot of adults are stuck in like, this is the way that we do things, and we do things like this forever and ever. When you're young, you never have that barrier because everything seems possible. And so I would just encourage you to explore the possible, and encourage, if you are an older person trying to like mentor a younger person, take them super seriously, help them make their plans, help them succeed, and lift them up wherever you can. Give them awards, do everything that you can to make them feel special, because that is what made a really big difference for me. And when you think that you can take on the world because you've done everything, then it's not as scary to take on things like climate change because you've already like done so much.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think the way that you both have discussed and shown examples of that mentorship aspect, I know in my personal life, mentors have been in some situations, the only reason I thought I could do something, because they were the ones who believed in me and told, helped me understand that I could do it and had the tools to do it. So I think, like you said, mentors are invaluable to anyone who is listening. We did have one question for you guys in the chat. This was wonderful because it absolutely was. From Emma, is it difficult to start an organization when you are no longer in a close community, like a high school or a college?
I can try first. I think it depends. I think you need to find your community within communities. And so like, if you're trying to recruit young people, like it is harder. I've worked with young people who aren't students, and that is definitely a different space because like they have jobs and families and are trying to manage a lot of different things because that's their world. And so I think though, if you can find people who are passionate about it and then provide people what they need in order to participate, that is kind of how I have found that we can get people involved. So like, for example, some young people, especially like young mothers, don't have a lot of options for childcare. So if you at your meeting, you are feeding people, and if you are providing childcare, you automatically provide for someone's needs, and it's like takes a huge burden off of people. Or if you are like having a meeting and then providing some time afterwards to like study and talk and like have food and things like that, there are ways that you can do it, and there's always people who care. So it's more about just marketing and advertising than trying to lower the barriers, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't have too much experience starting an organization. I just worked at the zoo my whole life, practically, from the time I was in college. But in something like Zoo Alive, yes, we have the zoo as a commonality, but it's one of the things that makes an interesting program. And it's a benefit and a challenge is that we do have students from all over the bi-state area who are in this program. So it's challenging to find a meeting time, when everybody gets out of school at a different time and a different break and different sports schedules and all of that. But it's certainly worthwhile to just get broad perspectives as well whenever you're trying to start an organization. And I don't have really, tips on how to do that. I could quote like, if you build it, they will come, or something like that, but I think that might be meaningless in this setting. But I believe in you, Emma. And I think where there's a will, there's a way. And if you want to, start an organization, social media and websites and flyers in a grocery store. I mean, I think you just have to use any avenue that you can think of to get the word out and hope that people see it.
Well, and I think like Natalie said, a community within a community. And I think that's what you have done with the ZA program, because I know ZAs that I've worked with and are friends with, or former ZAs that I'm friends with, and they're all still connected. They're still friends. Some still work together. And so they have created this huge community of people that then, go on to do amazing things. So even if it's not a formal organization, still having that community aspect, that group aspect is huge and very impactful.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you might feel like you're the only kid in your school who is interested in this, and finding your people, or as one of our former ZAs said, finding your mothership,
Yeah.
is important, but you find that group and you're in a place where you can look around and be like, wow, there actually is a lot of people working on this same thing. I just needed to find them, but they're definitely out there. And when you find your mothership, it's also a wonderful, wonderful feeling. There is a question in the Q&A as well. Were you going to say something, Natalie? Which I am happy to take a stab at.
Oh, yeah. So we have a question in the Q&A. It's from an anonymous attendee. So they're constantly around people who do not believe in climate change and do not really look at the big picture. So how can we change minds? How do you keep calm when people ignore or dismiss you? How do you keep it from getting political? And I want to encourage whoever asked this, our very first webinar was actually about climate change communication and really good tools that you can use to talk about climate change in a really productive way. So if you go to STLs, I'll put it in the chat too, stlzoo.com/climate change. Scroll all the way down. I believe you have to scroll all the way down to webinar 1. But Natalie, Eve, anything else? What would you guys recommend?
I actually just read this fantastic book. I was in a book club. So here's another plug for this book that is called High Conflict. Lisa was in that book club with me. Actually, we read this book together. The author is Amanda Ripley. But it really addresses sort of the polarization in, I'm just going to say in the world, not just about climate change, but politically, there's a great divide, and it talks about what causes divides like that and how you can bridge them. So highly recommend. But, one thing you ask is, how do you change minds? Okay, you don't, right? So that's not your goal, is not to go into a conversation looking to change minds. You go into a conversation with open ears to listen and process what somebody's saying. And, you can ask for that in return. Hey, I really want to hear your thoughts and opinions on this. And then, I ask you to listen to mine. And maybe there's somewhere in there where you can find common ground. And I think, I love how, at the zoo and everywhere we talk about climate in terms of solutions and in terms of, what are our values? What kind of future do we want to leave our kids? So regardless of, is climate change real? Is it not real? You can talk about, do we want to keep elephants on the planet? Let's start there. Are we concerned about biodiversity? Do we want to have natural areas where we can hunt? These are all things that, people who might originally, we might think of them as different. There's a lot of crossover between what we want in terms of clean air, healthy water, places for our kids and grandchildren to play that are safe and clean. So I think by starting there, without even talking about is climate change real or not, we can still focus on solutions that are going to be helpful in the long run, and hopefully build a relationship in the meantime with someone who at first seemed like, I'm never going to be able to talk to this person ever, to, maybe there's something we can talk about and try to get past that hump of we have nothing in common to try to find something that is in common.
Hey, Eve and Natalie, I had a question. Natalie, when you started that community garden, was that through your high school or was it in your community?
It was through my college and community. Yeah, and community college or the community people could participate in the garden. So you could rent plots, and you could either be from the direct surrounding community or you had to be a student, and you had to show based on your address or your wildcat card, because that's
sure
what it was.
So
yeah.
I'm trying to see in high schools. So if there's a mentor that kids could go to, whether it's a science teacher or something like that, if they have an idea to start like a community garden in their high school, how would they approach that science teacher or somebody in the faculty to help them get started with that? find a plot of land on the high school grounds or something like that. If youth were interested in doing something like that in a community garden at high school.
That's a great question. Usually I would just ask my friends to come talk to me with the science teacher. We had an AP environmental science teacher, and then also like my chemistry teacher I really liked. And we knew they were both environmental nerds, and that if we asked them if we could make a garden, that they would be like, yes. And then like, and I think this is where that mentorship piece comes in really importantly. Like they also helped me with my plastic bag projects. Like I don't know the inner workings of the school very well. Like, I don't know if you have to get permission from someone, or like if you need irrigation, or if you like, if you need to have certain things that can be planted, or some schools won't let you plant like edible things because they're worried about the risk and liability on the school if somebody were to come and just eat something and they get sick. So like there were things that like I would have never thought about, but my teachers did. Or if they didn't, they went to like, would take me to a meeting with like the principal, and then the principal would be asking me these questions. And so I just talk to people. That's literally how I do everything, is I just talk to people because I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. But I act confident and I sound confident. And then they are like, what a great idea. Let me help you. And then they start bringing up things that I would have never known, but it's great because it allows me to like learn that stuff. And if you have an idea of where you want to put the garden, even better. So if you're like, hey, here's like the plot of land that I'm thinking about, like right behind the science hall, like right here, so that we can all take care of it. And then that, like, when you start getting more specific, would be my suggestion, then people start reacting to the idea, not necessarily like the idea of the idea. So like, instead of just saying like, oh, I want to build a garden somewhere, if you say, oh, I want to build a garden behind the science hall, then it becomes more of a conversation of like, where does the garden go? Instead of like, where do we have a garden at all? And that's what I do with climate change communication too. So I wanted to tie both of those together. I just assume that it's happening, and I say, here's what we're going to do to solve the problem. And then we start talking about solving the problem instead of talking about the problem itself.
That's great. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. For all those youth that have some idea, whether they're one or two people in a high school that have an idea, maybe get some mentorship, and then the word helps to spread. So anyway, thank you.
Well, we are right at 6:30, but we do have one question that I do want to actually address with you guys. We do have, so Evangelina is 11 years old, and she absolutely loves animals and wants to help find solutions to climate change. So for someone this young that is so inspired already, which is amazing. So we're super happy to have you, Evangelina. Are there any programs or volunteer opportunities that she can do?
Well,
the answer is yes, but
I will say, if you were hoping to volunteer at the zoo, unfortunately, I have to crush your dreams, because you do have to be a minimum of 15 years old to volunteer at the zoo. So that being said, that is only the St. Louis Zoo, and there are other opportunities out there in organizations that you can check out with volunteer opportunities. There is, I know, a website that's called, it used to be called St. Louis Volunteens. I would have to Google it to see if that still exists. And even though you're technically not a teen yet, there are a lot of volunteer opportunities on St. Louis Volunteen. I'm not sure, I haven't looked lately to see what climate related things there are. But there are, of course, outside of doing volunteering, you can do whatever you want, Evangelina. I mean, you are never too young to start a project. So like we were talking about with Zoo Alive, identify a problem and think about what might be a solution. See if you can get some friends together who are on board with it and do it together. It can be something, simple like a recycling program, or a litter cleanup, or helping to plant native wildflowers in your own yard or your own community. or something more complicated. But one of the most important things, and I'm sure this is was addressed in some of our original webinars, one of the most important things you can do for the climate is to talk about it. So if you ever have an opportunity, an assignment in school where you have to write a paper or do a presentation, make it about climate. When you're talking to friends and relatives, you can bring it up and, ask adults, hey, what are you doing to address climate? That's a really important thing that youth can do, is just let people know that you're interested. But you can also, the world is your oyster. You can come up with problems you want to address and solutions and do it, especially when you have a group of friends or a teacher or a parent who wants to get on board and help you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we had another participant say maybe a parent or guardian would be able to volunteer with their parent or guardian to help kind of broaden their opportunities there too. Natalie, did you have anything else to add?
I just did my first project with my mom. She actually, I wanted to clean up some litter on our street. And so I went around to my neighbors and put little flyers in their mailbox, inviting them to a Saturday cleanup. And a couple of people showed up and we cleaned up a lot, and it was a lot of fun. And I even tried to do some flyering at the 4th of July parade. No one from the community at large came, but I mean, stuff like that you can easily do. But yeah, make sure your parent or guardian is helping you, because it's a lot of work by yourself.
And safety first.
Yes, always. But how encouraging, to do that, your first thing, and you did have people show up. So that's fantastic. All right, everybody. Well, we did go over time just a bit, but thank you all so much to those of you that were able to stick around with us. And I want to give a huge thank you to Eve and Natalie for their fabulous presentations today, facilitating our discussion. And thank you all so much for joining us. Please be on the lookout for information on next month's Community Climate Forum, which will be held on March 10th at 5:30 in the evening. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.